What's going on, guys? We're back on the channel with a review video. Now, this isn't something that I normally do, but I got reached out to a couple weeks ago from a company called Dehancer that I personally actually have never heard of. And after kind of looking into them a little bit and seeing what their company was all about, I was really intrigued by their offer. So they reached out to me looking to see if I wanted to review their film emulation plugin for either DaVinci Resolve or, in my case, Premiere Pro. Now, allow me to preface, they did provide me with the plugin free of charge in order to make this video, and they were kind enough to offer me an affiliate code to give to you guys in case you guys wanted to try out the plugin and get a little discount off of it. But we'll talk more about that later. And so I'm going to try to keep this as unbiased as possible. Something they did mention is that they wanted me to review this product in the most honest way possible. And that's the only way that I would actually end up doing this, because I know that I really appreciate it when I see other people who are reviewing products use their complete and utter honesty and just telling it for what it is. And so I intend to do the same. Now, in this video, it's just going to be a review. So I'm not going to go into detail in terms of how to utilize the plugin. I'm just going to give you my honest thoughts of it, and I'm going to leave all of the resources to kind of get you up to speed in terms of what the plugin is, how to utilize it, and all the little tutorials that Dehancer does provide down in the description below. So if you want to check that out, feel free to go ahead. But for the sake of this video, we're just going to talk strictly about the pros, the cons, and just kind of some of the ideas that are cool in theory, but I just haven't really seen a need for it. So first things first is the pros. So if we transition into Premiere and take a look at the first clip that you guys watched in the sequence, and if we just kind of mess around with some of the film LUTs that Dehancer does have pre-installed for you, they're actually pretty good. Now, for the sake of the video that you guys watched, I actually didn't end up using them, but if we were to enable it and kind of just cycle through briefly with some of the LUTs that they provide, there's some pretty good ones in here that I'm kind of a fan of. I think they're a great starting point for a lot of people to be able to kind of just get some type of look right off the bat and be able to then kind of mess around and tweak it to their own liking and taste. There is one little gripe that I do have with this, and this is kind of just really Premiere in general. I wish there was an easy way to kind of cycle through all of these. I'm using up and down arrows. However, it doesn't actually populate into the footage itself. If you guys know of a way to actually be able to click on it without actually fully entering in, please let me know. It gets a little tedious having to click on one and not knowing really at all what the LUT looks like, but that's just, I think, a product of what Premiere Pro really has to offer. I'm not sure if Dehancer is able to kind of implement something to be able to fix that. However, just wanted to make that small little note. Now, the other things that I'm going to mention that are pros to this plugin are going to be some of the more obvious sort of aspects of the plugin overall. And that's going to be the film grain, the halation, and the bloom. And I'm just going to bundle all of those three together because those are sort of the most common characteristics that people are kind of looking for to be able to implement into their own videos if they're trying to emulate that sort of filmic look. And Dehancer makes that really easy for you. And so once again, if we take a look at the plugin in the control panel, and let's just take a look at a new clip here, and we kind of just mess around with the film grain, and we open that tab, you'll notice, of course, we're able to toggle on and off pretty easily, and we actually get this nice little drop down menu that gives you a bunch of different profiles that you're able to choose from, all the way from 8mm all the way to 65mm film grain. I believe Dehancer actually takes a step further in terms of how they implement the film grain. I think they actually take a look at the footage itself and actually interprets it and is able to implement the film grain in a more realistic way compared to kind of just a basic overlay that Premiere does. The other thing they're able to implement, like I talked about earlier, is halation, which is always nice. That's always another aspect that people are trying to look to implement into their videos. And once again, same idea. It's a drop-down menu with all of the different millimeters of film in there. And if you want more information on what that actually does to your footage, this is where a big positive for me with Dehancer is that they provide tons and tons of tutorials and actually before and afters, and really shows you what is actually happening with your footage. I know for me, I'm not super familiar when it comes to film in general, and so a lot of this terminology is very new to me, and being able to kind of see just an explanation in terms of what that effect really does to your footage is just a great starting point for me to start to implement things with purpose rather than just based off of feeling. Next, we have bloom, which is another big thing that people are trying to implement. Essentially, you're just trying to bloom the highlights and make it look as soft as possible. You have a drop-down menu with different options that you can go from. They also offer this masking mode between the halation and bloom, and I believe in some of the other effects as well. If you were to toggle that on, you're able to see where the bloom is actually being implemented onto your footage, which I think is a huge positive. So if I cycle through here, you'll notice that when I go to 8mm, you'll notice it's a little bit more obvious compared to 65mm. And so when I saw that, I thought that was a really nice little touch that Dehancer was able to implement within the plugin. Now let's talk about some of the features that I like the idea of them, but I haven't really implemented them a whole lot in my workflow. And specifically, one of those tools that really stood out to me was the ability to utilize false color and clipping. And so if you go down to monitor and you click on false color, along with the clipping indication, an overlay will pop up over your footage and lets you know where all of the values are in terms of your exposure for your image on a scale utilizing color. It's not necessarily something that I've truly implemented into my workflow. And the reason being is because a lot of times when it comes to color correction and color grading, a lot of times I do it based off of a feel. I don't like to get super nuanced with it. Again, I'm not a colorist, so that's not really my line of work. A lot of times I just want something that looks good, feels good. And so when it comes to false color, I love the idea of it, but it's not really something that I really want to implement into my workflow every single time that I'm color grading. At times, I might be kind of curious to kind of see what's going on with the image, and it's a nice little tool and knowing in the back of my head that I'm able to implement it, but it hasn't really been something that I've truly dived into and I'm utilizing all of the time. Another feature that, again, I like the idea of, but I'm not really too concerned about is the conversion LUTs. And so Dehancer actually has the ability to be able to convert your footage from a log profile to a Rec 709 profile. And so let's work with a different clip, let's say this one, for example, and I turn off all of the adjustment layers. And so essentially we're back to the log footage, and the only thing that is currently on are the effects that we have from Dehancer. And if we go up to input and we change the source to choose camera and we indicate which camera specifically, and we go all the way down to Sony A7 III, and then we shot this in S-Log3 Cine. Obviously, you'll notice that this is completely blown out because of the fact that we need to make some minor adjustments in order to fix this. So if I were to bring down my exposure and we were to change our temperature and kind of just make some quick little adjustments here, bring down our shadows. I'm not gonna go too crazy with this, maybe bring up our whites a little bit, just to kind of get us in a nice working image. We're essentially back to the way that things were sort of intended for this piece of footage. And so essentially Dehancer has the ability to convert your log footage into a Rec 709 color space. And I love the idea of this. However, after sort of kind of experimenting with it a little bit, I've just sort of come to the conclusion that I sort of prefer utilizing the manufacturer's LUTs, specifically because I just am very OCD and I just like knowing that I am getting the most sort of guaranteed and intended way of a conversion LUT directly from the manufacturer. Not to say that maybe that might be the right answer or not, but it's kind of just an OCD thing. I'd rather just go directly from the source and not utilize a LUT that maybe a creator developed or anything like that. I've just always kind of had that mindset. And so that's why I don't tend to utilize their LUTs specifically when it comes to conversion. I just like utilizing the manufacturers. If this is something you might be interested, they have a long list of things, of different cameras that you can implement. If we come back here, of course, our footage looks insane for the moment. But yeah, they have tons of Sony, of course, Red, Panasonic, Fujifilm, DJI, Canon. Lastly, in terms of, I like the idea of it, but I haven't really, felt the need to utilize it, is basically every other effect that Dehancer has available. And so if we go back to the Dehancer plugin and we take a look at the long list of all of the other effects that they're able to implement, things like film developer, film compression, expand, print, color head. We talked about film grain, halation, and bloom, but then they have film damage, film breath, gate weave, overscan, vignette, all of these other effects that you're able to tackle on to your footage that I'm sure yields great results. It's just something that for me personally, in terms of the projects that I've currently been working on, I haven't really needed to utilize them. It's very rare for me that I'm trying to go super far into trying to emulate some form of, really vintage, film. There might come a project where I need to implement this, and Dehancer is going to be a great resource for me to implement that. But as of right now, I just haven't really seen a need to implement it. I have noticed that Dehancer is aware of this based on the fact that when you take a look at all of the products that you're able to purchase or the plugins themselves, they give you the ability to actually specifically purchase certain aspects or certain effects within this long list. And so things like film grain, halation, and bloom, which are one of the three biggest effects that I myself am constantly utilizing, and I know tons of other creators are constantly trying to emulate as well. They have those available for you, so you don't have to go and purchase the entire suite and have all of the different effects, but you're able to actually just get those three and kind of get more bang for your buck, if you will. And so take that into consideration if you're thinking about getting this plugin. Lastly, let's talk about the cons when it comes to this plugin. And this list is truthfully relatively short. And so the first things first, when it comes to this plugin, it's more of like an annoyance. I did figure out a workaround for this, but I just kind of want to bring it to your attention, is if we turn off the plugin and we just add a brand new one, you'll notice that it immediately is trying to affect our footage. And the reason being is because there is a natural preset that Dehancer provides within the installation that has certain aspects already enabled. And that's just kind of annoying for me because personally, I like to start from zero and kind of build from there. I don't like to have something already applied and I have to kind of backtrack a little bit before I can then begin. And so this is what I mean. If we go ahead and we just kind of go through all of the different inputs, first and foremost, when it comes to the input itself, the source is automatically on Rec 709, which does make sense. Most people are working in just a Rec 709 color space. For me, I've just been recently trying to experiment with the Aces CCT working color space. And so that makes sense to me why that's automatically checked off. So that's fine. So naturally, I will have to switch that over, which is not a big deal. But then if we were to continue going down, you'll notice that the film profile is automatically enabled. And so I have to naturally shut that off if I want to start from square one or zero, basically. So the film profile is already turned on, and let's see what else is already turned on. Expand is already turned on. It's enabled, however, nothing is actually affecting your footage because these values are set to 0 and 100 when it comes to the black point and white point. But for me, I don't know, I kind of just OCD, I like to just have that disabled just so I know with 100% confidence that nothing is affecting my footage that I don't know about. Because if I were to accidentally move this slider and I'm just really confused on why my footage looks a certain way, I like to know that it's not because of some weird fluke thing like this where I accidentally moved a slider and I wasn't aware of it. Another kind of big one is the print, and this automatically gets enabled. You can kind of see what it's doing to the footage overall. So that automatically gets enabled, which is a little annoying. Film grain is another big one that automatically gets enabled, so I have to disable that. And I believe that's essentially it for the rest. The workaround for this is you can actually change all of these parameters back to just essentially 0 and save that as a preset. So I already gone ahead and did that. So if I go to my effects panel and I go to presets, you'll notice that I have Dehancer Pro and then of course the version, and then I just typed in clean preset. And when I go ahead and drag and drop that, and let's just delete the old one, all of the parameters that I typically want are already implemented. And so the input is already in the Aces CCT working space. Everything is disabled. And so if I want to implement this plugin, now my workflow is going to the preset tab and adding it from there, because I know I'm working from square one and I'm able to implement everything that I want to implement without something else already being on, and I'm kind of confused on maybe why it looks a certain way when I'm trying to achieve some specific sort of look. The other con to this is that it also increases your render time. It's sort of a little bit unfortunate, and so if you do have an older machine, I'm not really sure how this is going to affect your footage specifically, but as of right now, I am screen recording, and for the sake of this video, I'm just kind of curious to see how this footage runs if I were to just play it in the timeline. For context, I do have a maxed out M4 laptop, and so it should be able to handle this relatively well, but there has been times where I've noticed that the preview is a slightly sort of laggy at certain times. I am playing it at full resolution, but again, I have noticed with other small projects that I've worked on where it has sort of stuttered just a little bit from time to time. But I just thought it was worth noting, especially if you have an older machine, that this might slow down your previews and your render time overall. The very last con that I have with this plugin is the inability to actually export the LUTs. Now, allow me to preface this specifically. You can export LUTs, so if you have a certain look that you've implemented with the plugin on your footage, there is a tab down below where you can actually export a LUT, and you have the ability to make it a smaller file or just the normal file, and you're able to export that and implement that on someone else's machine or device who has Premiere, for example, or even a monitor that you're using on set to be able to kind of mimic the look and feel that you're already looking for. However, this does not include things like film grain, halation, and bloom, which are some of the bigger components that I know I personally would be utilizing when it comes to this LUT specifically. And some of the other effects that don't get implemented into the export of the LUT is things like film breath, gate weave, and vignetting. And so you're able to get the colors in a space that feel sort of filmic. However, you can't export any of those sort of more heavy hitting effects when it comes to film grain or halation or bloom that more than likely you're trying to implement if you're trying to replicate that filmic look. And so that's just sort of a slight drawback when it comes to that. And of course, the other aspect to it as well, and this is sort of expected if you're utilizing plugins, is not everyone has this plugin. You do get more than one seat when it comes if you were to purchase this plugin, and so you're able to give out that license and have someone else utilize it on a different device. However, if you're working with more than one person on a project, or if you just kind of want to hand it off real quick, of course the plugin is not going to work on another device if they don't have this plugin implemented on their own machine. That's to be expected, just given the nature of plugins really in general. So I'm not really too surprised by this, but I just thought it was worth noting. And the last thing I wanted to mention was pricing. Now, the pretty cool thing that Dehancer does provide when it comes to their different options in terms of actually getting this plugin is that they give you the option to get a lifetime subscription for it. And so essentially you pay it one time. Yes, it's a little bit more pricey, but you never have to worry about it ever again. You just have it for life, and you always know in the back of your mind that you have the ability to utilize the plugin whenever needed. Now, with that being said, like I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I do have an affiliate code, so if you guys want a quick little discount, and if you're serious about getting the plugin, feel free to utilize that. I'll show it on screen, and you guys can get a nice little discount. And with that being said, I hope that kind of gave you a little bit of a better understanding of at least my perspective when it comes to the plugin itself. I tried to be as unbiased as possible. I tried to tell it for what it is, what I utilize, what I'm not really utilizing, but is a neat little idea, and what aspects of the plugin are not really ideal. And so with that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed. It's been myself, Steven, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.